I haven't been this excited for a video game in years. Final Fantasy VII is like one of my top 5 favorite video games of all time. It was one of the first games I got really invested in for the story and characters, and while I've played games since then that I'd say I like more for those categories, the fact that Final Fantasy VII still means so much to me today is a testament to just how good it was. Because this game is good, still to this day. A lot of people like to talk about how older games only hold up because of nostalgia, but I don't think that's true for any Final Fantasy game. I think you could go play 7 right now and still get a lot out of it. That being said, the idea of a remake has always been exciting. To see the story, characters, and world again in modern-day quality has always been appealing, and since the days of the PS3 tech demo and Advent Children, it's been on pretty much every fan's mind. So now that it's finally here, I want to talk a little bit about my anticipation, what I want from it, how they're going to go about delivering it, and what I think of what we've seen so far. To start off, we've known this game was going to be split into multiple parts from the beginning. While a lot of people latched onto the idea of it being an episodic release over the period of a year or so, similar to Telltale Games or The Life is Strange, early interviews suggested that they are viewing each part as its own full game, and it's probably going to take a lot more time for everything to come out. And now that we've had the big reveals, it seems that this is true. The most surprising thing to learn, though, is that Part 1 is apparently going to be on 2 Blu-ray discs. The question then becomes just how expanded and elaborate is this first part? The Midgar section of the original Final Fantasy VII was maybe like 5 to 6 hours long, and covered about 1/5 of the total story. I've completely made those numbers up, by the way, but that's how long it feels in comparison to the rest of the game, so I don't think anyone is going to argue with me. Watching interviews with Square Enix staff at E3 has had them talking a lot about how they want to expand elements of the game and make it feel like its own full experience. But they don't want to change too much in regards to the main characters and main story. They describe it as a particular balance they are looking to strike. While they haven't come out and directly said it, evidence strongly points to the members of Avalanche being the primary focus of the expanded content. In the original Final Fantasy VII, this group seems rather important, but twists in the story just a few hours in pulls focus away from both them and Midgar itself. And yes, I'm actually trying to dance around spoilers for this game, just in case someone who hasn't played it is actually watching this. But the point is, if there was any element of the Midgar chapter that could be fleshed out, it's them. So looking at this trailer, we do see a heavy focus put on them, especially Jessie, who has at least 2 scenes that look completely new. One had her handing Cloud some materia as thanks for saving her, and one has her riding on the back of a motorcycle that Cloud is driving. Now, there is a pretty famous motorcycle sequence from the original 7, but this isn't that. For one, Jessie wasn't involved in that scene, but also this isn't even that motorcycle, which we do see elsewhere in the same trailer. So at the very least, it seems like riding motorcycles is going to be something you do more often in the remake than in the original. Unless, of course, they've completely changed how the original motorcycle sequence plays out, and this was added earlier in the game to still have that moment from a gameplay perspective. Speaking of that motorcycle, though, can I just take a moment to express how amazing the Shinra building looks? This place was perhaps my favorite moment of the Midgar section, since it's so different from all the slums that you visit. While I'm certainly excited to see all the grime and sleaze of Wall Market and the like, I'm just as excited to potentially see more locations like this, because we do know that we're going to have entirely new sections of the city to explore. How much and where we get to go is still completely unknown right now, but there is a lot of potential. Midgar is an absolutely massive city, but within Final Fantasy itself, we only really get to explore a small part of it. The city itself is comprised of multiple sectors, with an above ground and below ground. The big gimmick of Midgar is that the entire city is covered in a big plate, and while the upper class citizens live on top of the plate, the lower class lives below it, in the slums of each sector. Most of our time in Midgar is spent in either the Sector 5 slums or the Sector 7 slums. Other locations are visited briefly for mostly linear story segments, for mere minutes at a time. So between all the other sectors we never get to see, not to mention potentially visiting the upper plate locations, there is certainly enough locations to fill out an entire game, and 2 Blu-ray discs certainly implies we're going to see a lot of it. But there is one more thing to consider with this: the pacing. Those interviews at E3 had them making sure to express that the main story will not change too much, and that most of the extra content will be coming from the supporting characters. Now, we have no confirmation, but I imagine a lot of that might take the form of side quests. There's definitely new content for the main characters too, which I'll get to next, but I can't imagine them slowing down the story to spend 20 hours going to all the other sectors with Biggs and Wedge, while the main plot just stalls. That would really kill the exciting pacing and tone of the original story. This is probably the main thing I'm curious to see in the final game. how the new content is going to be handled, because I absolutely want to explore way more of Midgar, especially if some of it ends up being more open and has some side quests, but I don't want it to come at the cost of slowing down the narrative too much. Of course, that main narrative does have new content too, and there's 3 changes I want to focus on. One for Aerith, one for Tifa, and one for Cloud. The Aerith one is the simplest. We get a brand new scene of her being attacked by weird ghost-like things. This has had a lot of people confused, and for good reason. Nothing like this is in the original 7. However, I don't think it's too much of a stretch to assume what this may be. Aerith is very much in tune with the Lifestream, which in Final Fantasy VII's world means she has a connection to the dead. Since she was a child, she's been able to sense and hear them. This could just be that, and her touching Cloud allows him to briefly catch a glimpse of what she sees. However, these same things also appear in promotional art for Sephiroth, and we get a better glimpse at them as they appear to be some kind of cloaked or robed figures. There are specific NPCs you meet wearing cloaks similar to this, but it'd be a pretty radical departure to depict them in this way. I think these may be new visual interpretations for the Ancients. A lot of the plot in 7 deals with the Ancients, so the remake may want to give them a more physical representation, and perhaps we're simply seeing this scare Aerith. Or maybe it's just a scene where they get attacked by ghosts. That does happen too. The Tifa change is a bit more subtle. There's this scene where she's talking with Cloud in her bar, and she seems very melancholic and hesitant about the situation she's in, saying specifically that she feels trapped. While this trailer could be being misleading, it seems like she's talking about her role in helping Avalanche. This is pretty much the opposite of the original game, where she's completely on board with Avalanche and is the one pushing Cloud to care more about them. We'll have to see where this new character arc for her goes, but it's possible that given Avalanche's actions as economic terrorists, they wanted to have a character that questions the violence of their actions. This is definitely a very delicate change to navigate around, so hopefully they pull it off well. That brings us to Cloud, whose change is the one that I find the most interesting. So, the original game spent a lot of time in its first half, especially the Midgar section, dancing around the mysteries of Cloud's, let's call them issues. There's a voice in his head, he randomly blacks out, he randomly clutches his head in fits of pain and hysteria. There's very clearly something traumatic in his past, and we're only given small details of it over time. This builds to what is arguably the main twist and biggest plot point later in the game. The problem is, that won't be in this game. If we're sticking to just Midgar, there's a lot that isn't going to be in this game that people may be expecting from a Final Fantasy VII Remake. Namely, Sephiroth. So instead of the voice in his head and moments where he blacks out, it appears that Cloud is going to be haunted more directly by a vision of Sephiroth. In 2 trailers now, we've seen completely new scenes of Sephiroth appearing before Cloud to taunt him. In one, he asks him if he can bear to see the planet suffer, and in the other, he encourages Cloud to run away. Both times he seems to be accompanied by fire, and in the final scene we get confirmation that this is all in Cloud's head. Now, the reveal of Sephiroth in the original game is very different. He's talked about, but by the time we actually see him, there's been a significant amount of tension built up around his return. Adding these scenes is going to inherently change how that feels, and I definitely get the impression that this was done so that we could have more scenes of Sephiroth in the first game, where he otherwise wouldn't if treated the way as the original. I can understand this change, especially since I don't think there's a single person who knows about FF7 that doesn't also know about Sephiroth, but it's at least interesting to note that they are considering cultural knowledge and fan expectations when deciding what to change about the pacing and tension of certain plot points. This, for me, brings up the question of the Nibelheim flashback. Originally, this flashback takes place at the first major rest the characters take after leaving Midgar, but given it's so vital to understanding both Cloud and Sephiroth, and is a key moment in the game, one that gets called back to and elaborated on much later, I feel like they may want to get it into the first game in the series. This raises a couple of questions for me, though. First is setting and tone. In the original FF7, you only see anything outside of Midgar in like 2 small glimpses of Cloud and Tifa as children, while the Nibelheim flashback is a big elaborate section of the game and is a more natural looking world. Its placement after you leave Midgar is good in the original game, since spending so much time outside of the city would lessen the impact you feel in leaving it yourself and seeing the wider world. I'd hate for that to be lost in the remake, especially if we're spending a whole game's worth of time within the city. On the other hand, it'll be pretty lame to see all those new scenes building up Sephiroth's role in Cloud's path without at least seeing some of it more directly, and it'll be really awkward pacing to open the second game with them getting to a village and then having this flashback. I think for pacing and story purposes, it'd be way better to move this to the first game, but for thematic and setting reasons, I feel it may be a bad idea to do so. As you can see, I'm clearly very conflicted on this subject. There's not too much more I can say about the story for now, other than if I were to make a giant list of all the things I'm excited to see. Of course, I'm looking forward to seeing all the characters we haven't yet, the Turks, Hojo, Red 13, and so on. I'm excited to see just how sleazy and fun to explore Wall Market is going to be, and I hope they handle that one specific section of the game tastefully. There's actually a few elements of the game that I think could be handled better than the original did, so hopefully that does happen. From what we've seen in all of the gameplay they've shown, I'm excited about the combat. I'm a big fan of turn-based RPGs, but I've always been okay with the remake being something different. I just recently did a 2-month-long marathon of every Kingdom Hearts game, so I've become pretty familiar with Nomura's directing, and since this is going to be the KH2 battle director as well, I'm pretty sure it's going to feel great. I'd like that they have a way to play for people that want it to be slower and more tactical, and a way for people to play that want it to be faster and more action-based. And for what it's worth, the tactical option looks way better implemented than Final Fantasy XV's does. And I like that there is staggering, so I can say the remnants of 13 lives on. The one thing that really stands out about what they've shown so far is just the detail and spectacle of it all. The Guard Scorpion boss fight is so elaborate, it has you interacting with the environment with several major phase changes, and that's just the first boss. When I imagine some of the later bosses in the game given that kind of treatment, I get goosebumps. But to be fair, within Midgard itself, there's only a few fights I'm really excited to see. Unless, of course, they add a bunch of new stuff. Perhaps the best thing they've shown so far for me was all the dialogue. The characters talk so much during gameplay itself, including combat, and since I love these characters so much already, I'm excited to hear all of it. Some of the dialogue that's been reported on from the show floor is apparently really good too, and Cloud's personality is finally much closer to the original 7 than what they did to him in all of its spin-offs and sequels. Well, I think this has gone on long enough. As you can tell, I'm very excited for this remake, and I'm thinking about it a lot. I'm sure this isn't the last time I'm going to talk about this game. For what it's worth, this is the second video I've made about a game I'm excited for at E3. While I've scripted this one, I've also recorded a very unscripted video about Breath of the Wild's sequel. If you have the time and want to watch more of me rambling, I'd be curious to hear what anyone thinks about these two videos in comparison. I'm unsure if I want to do more scripted or unscripted stuff in the future, and how I can improve both styles. I only do these YouTube videos for fun, so I don't put as much effort into them as people that actually do this stuff seriously, but I do enjoy making them, so I'm open to feedback. Well, that's it for now. If I can think of anything else I want to ramble about, I'll definitely make another video, but as of now, I'm just really excited for this game.